You never forget the moment your own blood looks at you like a burden. It wasn't anger that cut me that day. It was the quiet disgust in my grandson's eyes. Ethan, 17, tall, brilliant, and already ashamed of the man who once built everything he now enjoys. And Lily, 15, glued to her phone, rolling her eyes every time I opened my mouth. If I'm honest, I saw it coming, but knowing it doesn't make it hurt less. That morning began with laughter, theirs, not mine. "Grandpa, you really shouldn't wear that old jacket," Ethan said, smirking. "You look like you escaped a museum." Lily giggled without even looking up from her screen. "Post him on TikTok, Ethan. Caption, 'When vintage goes too far.'" They thought it was harmless fun, kids being kids, but I'd buried a wife, raised a son, and fought through 2 economic collapses. Mockery from my own blood was the one thing I wasn't prepared for. Their father, my son Mark, was too busy chasing contracts and promotions to notice how the tone in his house had changed. Success had made them all allergic to humility. My small-town manners didn't fit their polished lives. I could feel it every time I visited their glass and steel mansion, where silence hummed like an expensive refrigerator, and warmth existed only in the heating vents. "Dad," Mark said that day, "try not to embarrass the kids tonight, okay? It's an important dinner." Embarrass them? The word stung worse than the arthritis in my hands. I'd taught that boy to hold a hammer, to drive a nail straight, to look a man in the eye when he spoke, and now he was warning me not to embarrass anyone. The dinner was for Ethan's acceptance into some elite prep school, something his parents called the next step to greatness. I was proud, of course I was. I'd always wanted my grandkids to have more than I did, but sitting there at that long marble table, surrounded by crystal glasses and imported wine, I realized more had cost them something precious: gratitude. "So, Grandpa," Ethan said, swirling his sparkling water like it was champagne, "you ever think about how different your life could have been if you'd gone to college?" His tone wasn't curious, it was amused, like he was testing the limits of how far he could go. "I think about it sometimes," I said. "But life's not about degrees, it's about what you build." He smirked. "Yeah, but some people build skyscrapers, others build sheds." Even Mark laughed. Softly, but he laughed. And that was the moment I realized I'd lost him too. I looked around the table at the candles, the designer dishes, the expensive cutlery I couldn't pronounce, and felt the air shrink around me. My late wife, Mary, would have told me to let it go, to be patient, to understand that young people don't mean half the things they say. But Mary wasn't here anymore. And patience, I was learning, has limits. After dinner, Lily asked, "Grandpa, do you even know what cryptocurrency is?" I smiled. "I know enough to stay out of it." She laughed like that was the funniest thing she'd heard all week. "No wonder you're broke." Broke. The word didn't just sting, it rewound my whole life in an instant. The nights I'd spent in the freezing rain fixing generators to keep food in my family's fridge. The years I'd gone without new shoes so Mark could have books for school. The business I'd built from scratch, Tom's workshop, that had paid for the very house they lived in before they tore it down to build this monument to luxury. I looked at Lily, still laughing, and Ethan, already on his phone again, and felt something shift inside me. Not rage, clarity. "Kids," I said quietly, "you ever wonder how your father could afford this life?" They barely looked up. "He works hard," Ethan said. "He does," I nodded. "But when he started his first business, do you know whose savings he used?" Silence. "Mine," I said softly. "Your grandpa's retirement, every penny I had. No contracts, no papers, just trust. Because family should mean something." Ethan rolled his eyes. "Yeah, okay, Grandpa. Don't guilt trip us with your sacrifice story." Lily added, "You're acting like you're the reason we have a roof." I stood up slowly because at my age, standing takes a bit of planning. "I'm not acting," I said. "I'm reminding you." That night, I packed my small suitcase and went back to my old cottage on the edge of town, the place where the floors creaked, the roof leaked, and the air smelled faintly of cedar and memories. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I sat by the fireplace watching the embers fade, and promised Mary I'd stop trying to fit into a world that had forgotten what respect looks like. For a week, I heard nothing from them. Then, last Sunday, Mark called. "Dad," he said, "we've been meaning to talk. The kids feel uncomfortable visiting your house. It's not really up to their standards." My standards, I repeated, trying not to laugh. I built that house with my hands. I know, but they're used to different surroundings. Maybe it's time you moved into something more manageable. There's a nice retirement community opening nearby. Heated pool, activities, everything you need. Everything I need. That night I sat in the dark and thought about everything I'd given that family, their home, their education, their safety. And now they wanted me tucked away somewhere comfortable so I wouldn't tarnish their polished image. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was just an old man clinging to memories. But they'd forgotten something important, something I'd built my entire life around. Every property, every investment, every piece of land I ever bought for the family was still under my name. The mansion, the business, even the land under that. Shiny private school Ethan was bragging about. They all trace back to one signature, mine. And I was done being forgotten, because the next time they laughed at me, it wouldn't be in my house. It would be in the middle of theirs, when they finally realized who really owned the ground beneath their polished shoes. They say revenge is a young man's game, but I've lived long enough to know that patience is stronger than fury. Fury burns out quick. Patience builds storms. 3 days after that phone call, I drove into town, the same way I had for 40 years before I retired. The road hadn't changed much. Same leaning telephone poles, same rusted diner sign, same stray dog sleeping behind the post office. Only I had changed. My hands were slower, my back stiffer, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. I stopped at the old law office on Elm Street. "Good morning, Mr. Benton," I said when I walked in. The young receptionist blinked at me. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell him it's Tom Carter," I said. "He'll remember." And he did. A few minutes later, Benton came out from his office, gray-haired now, but still with that same steady lawyer's smile. "Tom," he said, shaking my hand, "you still driving that rusty truck?" "She's still running," I said. "Just like me." He laughed. "What brings you here?" "Family business," I said, and my tone must have told him enough. When I sat in his office, I pulled out a thin folder from my old leather briefcase. Inside were copies of deeds, trust agreements, and property titles. Years of quiet planning that my son had never bothered to understand. "You remember these?" I asked. Benton put on his glasses, flipping through the papers. "You kept the deeds in your name after transferring the business. Smart move." "Insurance," I said, "in case family forgot who built what." He nodded slowly. "I take it they forgot." "They did," I said. "I'm thinking it's time for a reminder." Benton leaned back. "What kind of reminder?" "The kind that makes you listen," I said. He understood without me saying more. Lawyers always do. Within an hour, we'd drawn up what he called a restructuring. In simpler words, it meant that all access, all profit, and all control of the family assets were returning to me. The house, the cars, the business bank accounts, everything that carried my name, even quietly. When I left the office, the air felt clearer, like the world had taken a deep breath with me. I didn't plan on revenge, not exactly. What I wanted was clarity, for them to see the truth behind all their glittering surfaces. And the truth was, they had built nothing. They were living inside my work, my sweat, my story. They just didn't know it yet. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, spreading out the papers under the dim light. The fireplace cracked, the clock ticked, and outside, the crickets hummed, like a steady heartbeat. I thought of Mary again. She would have told me to forgive, to let it go. But forgiveness, I decided, isn't given to those who haven't asked for it. The next morning, I called my grandson. "Ethan," I said, "your old man needs some help with a few boxes from the shed. You free this weekend?" Silence. Then, I'm kinda busy, Grandpa." "Too busy to help your grandpa?" "It's not that," he said quickly. "It's just, Mom's hosting some people from Dad's work. They're, important." "I see," I said softly. "Well, maybe another time." "Sure," he said. "Love you, Grandpa." He hung up before I could answer. Love you. 2 words said like they were a password, not a feeling. Later that day, I stopped by Mark's company, Carter Construction Group, the same business I'd built from my 2 hands in the 1970s. When I walked into the office, the young receptionist barely looked up. "Sir, we don't take walk-ins." "I'm not a walk-in," I said. "I'm the founder." That got her attention. Within minutes, Mark appeared in his sleek suit, smiling the polite smile people use when they don't want witnesses. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "Just wanted to see the place," I said. "Been a while." He guided me to his office, a glass box with expensive furniture and no soul. "You could have called," he said. "I prefer surprises," I said. On his desk sat a framed picture of his family. My photo wasn't anywhere, not even in a corner. "I stopped by Benton's office," I said casually. Mark froze. "Why?" "To talk about the business, about ownership." He laughed nervously. "Dad, you retired. We've handled everything for years." "You've handled the work," I said, "not the ownership." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I mean, the deeds," I said, sliding a folded paper across his desk. "The property titles, the bank authorizations, the trademarks, they're still under my name. Always have been." Mark's face went pale. "Dad, you can't just—" "I can," I said gently. "And I have." He leaned forward, voice rising. "You're going to ruin everything. I have clients, investors, contracts. Maybe they should know who really built the company they're working with," I said. He sank back, breathing hard. "This isn't fair." "Neither is calling your father an embarrassment," I said. Silence fell between us. Outside the window, I could see the city skyline, half a dozen projects I'd designed when Mark was still in diapers. He'd grown rich off my blueprints, and now he was realizing that even his empire stood on foundations I'd poured myself. "I'm not taking anything from you," I said finally. "I'm just reclaiming my name." "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "Respect," I said. "And maybe dinner, with the family, at my house." He looked at me like I'd asked him to climb Everest. "Dad, you know the kids? Tell them I've got a surprise for them," I said. "Something worth their time." He didn't answer, but I could tell curiosity was already nibbling at his pride. That Saturday evening, I cooked all day. Roast beef the way Mary used to make it, mashed potatoes with real butter, apple pie cooling on the windowsill. My little cottage smelled like home, something I hadn't felt in a long time. At 7 sharp, headlights swept across the gravel driveway. The sleek SUV pulled up, and out they came. Mark, his wife, Ethan, and Lily, all dressed like they were attending a charity gala. Ethan's first words were, "Wow, it's small." "Cozy," Lily added, wrinkling her nose. "Come in," I said. "Watch your step. Floor's old, like me." They sat awkwardly at the table, barely touching the food. But I didn't mind. I was waiting for the right moment. After dessert, when the silence grew too thick to ignore, I reached for a folder on the counter. "I wanted to show you something," I said. Mark sighed. "Dad, please don't start another argument." "No argument," I said. "Just the truth." I slid the papers across the table, copies of every deed, title, and ownership record. Ethan glanced at them first. "What is this?" "Your inheritance," I said. "Or what it used to be." Mark frowned. "Dad, what are you saying?" "I'm saying everything you live in, everything you use, every dollar that built your life, belongs to me. Legally, still." Lily laughed nervously. "You're kidding." I looked at her. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" The room went quiet. Only the ticking clock filled the space. "You can't just take everything back," Mark said. "I'm not taking it back," I said softly. "I'm reminding you who gave it." Ethan stood up. "This is crazy. You're just trying to prove something." "You're right," I said. "I'm proving that wealth doesn't start with fancy degrees or city addresses. It starts with hands that work and hearts that don't quit." They didn't have a response. Maybe they never would. But that night, for the first time in years, I saw something I hadn't seen in their eyes before. Uncertainty. A crack in their arrogance. As they left, Ethan mumbled, "Good dinner, Grandpa." Lily stayed silent, but she didn't roll her eyes. And Mark, he hugged me. A stiff, awkward hug, but a hug nonetheless. When the door closed behind them, I sat back down by the dying fire. I wasn't smiling, but I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, peace. They thought the lesson was over, but it was only beginning. Because I hadn't told them about the last clause Benton added to those papers, the one that would decide what happened to everything when I was gone. And when they discovered it, they'd understand what family truly means. I didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. The fire had long gone cold, but I just sat there, staring at the last ember until it turned to ash. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized that what I'd done wasn't revenge. It was a mirror. I'd finally forced them to look at themselves, and for the first time in years, they didn't like what they saw. But my story wasn't finished yet, not even close, because Benton's final clause, the one I hadn't mentioned to Mark, was more than a legal trick. It was my last gift and my last test. The clause said this: upon my death, all assets, the house, the business, the land, would transfer not to Mark, but to whichever grandchild proved capable of understanding what worth truly means. There was no fixed metric, no amount of money, no diploma, just my written note inside the will. Find what can't be bought. Simple words. But I knew they'd drive my family crazy. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you. By Sunday morning, I'd already heard from Benton. They called me, he said, his voice half amused, half nervous. Your son's not too happy. I imagine not, I said. Did you tell him about the clause? Not a word, just that it exists. Good, I said. Let them wonder. 2 days later, I got my first visitor. Ethan. He pulled up alone in his shiny new car, something German and loud that probably cost more than my old workshop. He walked up the path like a man approaching a battlefield. Grandpa, he said, can we talk? Of course, I said. Coffee? He looked uncertain. Sure. Inside he seemed restless, his leg bouncing as he sat at the table. Dad's losing it, he said finally. You can't just hold everything hostage. He worked his whole life for that company. I smiled. Whose life, Ethan? He looked away. You don't understand how the world works now. You can't just play with people's futures because you're hurt. I'm not playing, I said. I'm teaching. Teaching what? He snapped. That we're ungrateful? Fine, we get it. Can you just fix this before you ruin everything? I looked at him, my grandson, the boy who used to sit on my shoulders to watch fireworks, who'd once drawn a crayon picture of us fixing a fence together. That same boy now sat across from me, eyes hard with entitlement. Ethan, I said softly, do you know what your last name means? He blinked. Carter? Yes. You ever look it up? He shrugged. No. It comes from the Old English word charioteer, a man who carries goods, who transports what others can't, someone who works so others can live. He frowned, not sure where I was going. That's what our name means, Ethan. To carry, to work, to serve. Somewhere along the way, we forgot that. He didn't answer. He just stared at the table, the gears turning behind his silence. I don't want your money, Grandpa, he said finally, standing up. I just want this drama to stop. Then start with a little respect, I said. He left without saying goodbye. That night, I took out a wooden box from my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were photos, Mary in her wedding dress, Mark as a boy holding his first hammer, Ethan's baby picture, Lily's drawing from kindergarten that said, I love you, Grandpa. The edges were faded, but the feeling wasn't. I wrote 2 letters that night, one for Ethan, one for Lily. No legal talk, no guilt. Just words from a man who'd spent his life building things no one saw. I sealed them and left them on my desk, then slept for the first time in days. By the end of the week, Lily came, not with her parents, just her, a backpack slung over one shoulder, hair messy, eyes red from crying. Mom and Dad are fighting, she said quietly when I opened the door. I nodded. Come in, sweetheart. She sat on the couch, staring at her shoes. They keep arguing about the house, about you. I hate it. I handed her a cup of cocoa, the same way I used to when she was little. Families fight, I said. Sometimes it's how they find out what they really care about. She sipped the cocoa, silent for a while. Then she looked up. Are we really going to lose everything? Depends on what you mean by everything, I said. You'll still have each other. You'll still have love, if you choose it. She frowned. That's not what Dad means. I know, I said gently. But it's what I mean. Then she did something that cracked the shell around my heart. She started crying. Not the quiet kind, but the kind that comes from deep inside, from a place that still remembers kindness. I'm sorry we made fun of you, she said through tears. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to fit in. I put my hand on hers. You don't have to be sorry. You just have to remember who you are. We spent the rest of the evening baking cookies, laughing about how awful we both were at following recipes. For a few hours, it felt like the world was right again. When Mark called the next morning, his voice was tight. "Lily didn't come home last night." "She's here," I said calmly. "What? Why?" "Because she needed to remember what home feels like." "Dad, this has gone too far. You're turning them against me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He hung up. For the next week, Lily stayed with me. She helped me fix the old porch steps, fed the stray cat that wandered the yard, and asked questions about Mary, about when I was young, about the things her father never told her. And for the first time in years, the house felt alive. Then, one afternoon, I heard tires crunching on the gravel, Mark's SUV again. And this time, he wasn't smiling. Ethan was with him, his face unreadable. They stormed in before. I could even say hello. "Dad," Mark said, "this ends today." "Agreed," I said, standing. "Let's end it properly." I reached for the same folder again, but this time I added something new. A single envelope, sealed and marked to be read together. "Sit down," I said. They did. Even Ethan, though reluctantly. Lily sat beside me. I opened the envelope and unfolded a letter written in my careful, old-fashioned script. It wasn't long, just a few lines Mary and I had written years ago, back when we first drew up our will. "If our family ever forgets that love matters more than wealth, the family wealth will mean nothing. To the one who finds this letter and chooses love over pride, everything will be restored." I looked up at them. "That's the clause, not about money, about love." Mark frowned. "You can't enforce that legally." "You're right," I said, "but life can." Lily reached out and took my hand. "Then I guess I win." Her smile broke me open and mended me all at once. Ethan looked at her, then at me. I could see the conflict behind his eyes, pride fighting shame. "Grandpa," he said finally, "I want to help you fix the porch tomorrow, if that's okay." Mark said nothing. He just stared at the floor, shoulders sagging under the weight of years he couldn't undo. As they left that evening, I stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in Mary's favorite colors, gold and rose and soft violet. Maybe this was what she meant by patience. You don't always get justice through punishment. Sometimes you get it through grace. And yet, as the wind rustled through the trees, I knew one more storm was coming, because wealth has a way of tempting people twice, and Mark wasn't finished fighting yet. I woke up the next morning to the sound of hammering. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, Mary's voice in my head telling me to fix the loose step again. But then I heard Ethan's voice. "Hey, Grandpa, you got any more nails?" He was on the porch, shirt rolled up, sweat on his brow, hammer in hand. And for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who once followed me everywhere, asking questions about every tool I touched. "In the red toolbox," I called, "bottom drawer." He found them, nodded, and went right back to work. No complaining, no phone in sight, no eye rolls, just focus, real, honest work. I stood there watching, coffee in hand, the sun breaking through the trees. It felt like something small but important had shifted in the world. Lily came out next, hair tied up, holding a plate of pancakes. "Breakfast for workers?" she said proudly. I smiled. "You two are making me look like I run a construction crew again." Ethan laughed quietly. "Guess it runs in the family." We ate together on the steps, the three of us. No silverware that matched, no fine china, just chipped plates, warm syrup, and the sound of birds. For the first time. In a long time, I didn't feel invisible. But peace doesn't last when pride is nearby. At noon, Mark showed up. His car kicked up a cloud of dust, like a storm rolling down the driveway. He climbed out wearing his suit, probably just came from some meeting where people nodded at him too much. His eyes went straight to Ethan and Lily, then to me. "So, this is what you've been doing," he said, "turning my kids against me." Ethan straightened. "Dad, it's not like that." "Quiet," Mark snapped. "You think you can manipulate them with your guilt stories and your old photos? They're children, Dad. They don't understand what's at stake." "Then maybe you should explain it," I said. He paced like a man trying to hold his world together by sheer will. "You're destroying everything. The company, the house, our future. Do you even realize how many people depend on me?" "On you?" I said softly. "Or on the man whose name still signs the checks?" His jaw tightened. "You can't do this. You can't rewrite history." I'm not rewriting it, I said. I'm just reminding you who started it. He looked at me for a long time, and then something ugly flickered across his face. Fear. Fine, he said. You want to play this game? You'll regret it. He turned to Ethan and Lily. Both of you, get in the car. Ethan didn't move. No. What did you say? I said no, Dad. The words hung in the air like thunder. Lily set her plate down and stood beside her brother. We're staying here tonight, she said quietly. With Grandpa, Mark's face went red. You're making a mistake, both of you. Ethan took a step forward. Maybe, but at least it's ours to make. Mark's eyes darted from them to me. This isn't over. He slammed the car door and sped off down the dirt road, leaving silence and dust in his wake. After he was gone, Lily whispered, He'll be back. I know, I said. He's still my son. That evening, I lit the fireplace and pulled out the old photo albums. Ethan and Lily sat beside me on the worn sofa, flipping through pages of faces they barely recognized. That's your great-grandfather, I said, pointing to a black and white photo of a man with rough hands and tired eyes. He worked a coal mine for 40 years, never had more than 3 pairs of shoes his whole life, but he left enough to buy a small plot of land. That land became the workshop I started. Ethan studied the picture. He looks proud. He was proud, but never arrogant. That's the balance people forget. We talked for hours that night, about Mary, about the early days of the business, about how money could either feed you or hollow you out. Ethan listened like a man hearing his own story for the first time. Lily fell asleep halfway through, head on my shoulder, a soft snore that made me smile. Later, after I'd carried her to the spare room, Ethan stayed behind by the fire. Grandpa, he said, when you said everything still has your name, does that mean Dad could lose it all? If he keeps treating people like property, yes, I said. He was quiet for a long time. Then give it to me. I'll fix it. I chuckled softly. You can't fix greed with more ambition, son. You fix it with purpose. He nodded slowly. Then teach me. And so, over the next few weeks, I did. Every morning, Ethan and I worked in the old shed. I showed him how to sand wood, how to mend a hinge, how to fix what's broken without throwing it away. He caught on fast. He wasn't lazy. He'd just never been shown the joy in creating something with your own hands. Lily helped too. She painted signs, planted flowers out front, even convinced Ethan to build a small bench for the porch. We spent hours talking, laughing, arguing, learning. My heart felt lighter with each day. But the world outside wasn't staying quiet. One afternoon, Benton called again. Tom, he said, I think you should know. Your son's been making moves. What kind of moves? He's meeting with buyers, investors, trying to transfer company shares without your signature. He's desperate, I sighed. Desperate men do stupid things. Be careful, Benton warned. Pride can turn dangerous. That night, I sat on the porch, staring at the stars, the same sky Mary used to love. I could almost hear her voice. You can't save someone who refuses to see the fire they started. Still, he was my son, and I wasn't done trying. The next morning, I called Mark. Meet me at the workshop, I said. One last time. He hesitated. Why? Because there's something you need to see before you lose it forever. He showed up that afternoon, looking more tired than angry. I think he'd been sleeping in his office. All right, Dad, he said. What's this about? I led him inside. The smell of sawdust and oil filled the air. The scent of my life. On the workbench sat a small wooden box I'd made years ago, carved with the initials MC for Mary Carter. Open it, I said. Inside was a folded letter and a gold wedding ring, Mary's. He looked at me, confused. She left this for you, I said. She wanted you to have it when you were ready. He unfolded the letter, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't have to read it again to know what it said. I'd memorized every word. Mark, if you ever forget what your father taught you, look at this ring. It's small, but it held a lifetime. Love built this family, not money. If you lose love, you'll lose everything else too. When he finished, he looked at me with wet eyes. She knew, didn't she? She always did. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, in a quiet voice I hadn't heard since he was a boy, he said, Dad, I've been an idiot. Yes, I said, but an honest one, finally. He laughed once, bitterly. Can we fix it? We can try, I said. But first, you have to tell them the truth. He nodded slowly. All of them? All of them. That was the deal. And it would test whether he'd really changed or was just afraid to lose. The next weekend, I invited everyone to the company's annual staff gathering. Old workers, new employees, even the families. Mark stood on that stage in front of 100 people, including his own children, and told them everything. How I'd built the company, how pride had nearly destroyed it, how he'd forgotten the meaning of his name. When he finished, there was silence. Then slowly people started clapping. Ethan looked at me and smiled. Lily clapped too, tears in her eyes. For the first time in years, I felt peace settle deep in my chest. But peace doesn't erase pain. It just teaches you how to carry it. That night, I drove back home under a sky full of stars, thinking of Mary. We did it, I whispered, but the story wasn't done. Because the next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name written in a familiar hand. It was from Benton. Tom, urgent. Mark's confession has attracted attention. Someone's filed a claim against your estate. You need to come in immediately. I sat on the porch, the letter trembling in my hand. Whatever lesson I thought I'd finished teaching, it wasn't over yet. The paper trembled slightly in my hands as I read Benton's words again. A claim against your estate. I'd faced storms before, wars, recessions, death. But this one felt different. This wasn't a fight against time or circumstance. This was a fight against the people I loved. I folded the letter, slipped it into my jacket pocket, and stared at the road that led to town. The sun was barely over the trees, the world still quiet. Somewhere inside, I was hoping this was a mistake, that Benton had exaggerated, that it was some bureaucratic misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. Mark had been honest at the company event. I could feel it in my bones. But money has a way of waking sleeping demons, especially when pride is still limping behind guilt. At noon, I drove to Benton's office. The bell above the door jingled the same way it always had. He looked up from his desk and sighed in that slow, careful way that told me the news wasn't good. "Tom," he said, "I wish you'd come with better timing." "Tell me what's going on," I said. He gestured for me to sit, then pulled a folder from his desk drawer. Inside were legal documents, stamped, filed, official-looking things that smelled like trouble. "It's your son," he said quietly. "But he's not the one behind this." I frowned. "Then who?" He pushed the papers toward me. There it was, in clean black ink. Petitioner, Margaret Carter, Mark's wife, my daughter-in-law. "She's claiming mismanagement of marital property," Benton said, arguing that since her husband's company profits were built from assets you own, she's entitled to a share in your estate. "Entitled," I muttered, the word sour on my tongue. "She's always liked that word." Benton rubbed his temples. "I've seen this before, Tom. It's not really about money. It's about control. She's trying to force your hand, make you transfer everything before you die so she can secure it for herself and the kids." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling fan. "So she's suing her father-in-law." He nodded grimly. "And by extension her husband, whether he knows it or not." A silence fell between us, thick and heavy. Finally, I said, "Then I suppose it's time she remembers who she's dealing with." When I got back home, Lily was on the porch, painting again. She'd found her grandmother's old easel in the shed and turned the yard into her studio. She looked up when she saw my face. "Bad news?" "Complicated news," I said. She frowned. "Mom?" I nodded. She dropped the brush. "I told her to stop talking about the house, Grandpa. She said you were being selfish. I told her she doesn't even know what that word means." I smiled faintly. "You did good, sweetheart." "Are you going to fight her?" she asked. "Oh, I'll do more than that," I said softly. "I'm going to teach her a lesson she won't forget." 2 days later, Margaret herself showed up. She didn't call first. She just pulled into the driveway in her spotless white SUV and stepped out like she was arriving at a photo shoot. Designer sunglasses, silk scarf, that smile people wear when they think they've already won. "Tom," she said sweetly, "we need to talk." "Do we?" I asked. She followed me up to the porch. "I tried to handle this privately, but Mark's not thinking clearly. You've filled his head with guilt. He's letting emotion cloud his judgment." Maybe guilt is just another word for conscience, I said. She waved that off like a fly. You've made your point, Tom. You wanted gratitude. Fine, you got it. But now it's time to be practical. You're not getting any younger. You can't manage all these assets forever. Let us take care of it. Us, I repeated, meaning you. Her jaw tightened. Meaning your family. I leaned against the railing. You mean the same family that tried to put me in a retirement home? The one that couldn't stand my old jacket at dinner? The one that calls hard work embarrassing? Her eyes flickered. You're being emotional. No, I said quietly. I'm being awake. She crossed her arms. You can't keep punishing us because you feel unappreciated. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting what's left of my wife's legacy. Her voice softened, but it wasn't kindness. It was calculation. Tom, you can't protect them forever. When you're gone, this will all fall apart. Why not make it easier for everyone? Transfer ownership to Mark now. Secure your grandchildren's future. I looked at her for a long moment. Which grandchildren? That made her blink. The ones who call me a burden, I said, or the ones who sat on this porch and learned the value of dirt under their nails. Tom, be reasonable. I cut her off with a raised hand. No, Margaret, you've spent years confusing wealth with worth. You think family is a business deal, but I've buried enough people to know that love is the only currency that lasts. She rolled her eyes, the mask slipping for a moment. You always did love your speeches. I learned from experience, I said. You learned from magazines. Her face hardened. If you think your little morality plays will stop this, you're wrong. I've already filed the claim. The court date's set. I nodded slowly. Good. Then I'll see you there. She smirked. And when the judge sees an old man clinging to property he can't maintain, he'll side with me. People like you are predictable. Maybe, I said, but you've forgotten something. She tilted her head. What's that? I'm a Carter, I said, and we don't let other people carry our burdens for us. That night, I called Benton again. Draw up a new document, I said. He hesitated. Another clause? No, I said. A gift. To whom? I smiled faintly. To the ones who've already earned it. He understood. By the end of the week, I'd rewritten everything. The business, the properties, even the old workshop. But this time, there was no guessing game. The papers named my heirs outright. One line read, Upon my passing, all assets shall transfer to Lily Carter for her demonstrated understanding of the family's values. The next line, Ethan Carter is to receive full control of the workshop, provided he continues the trade with integrity and humility. And finally, Mark Carter shall serve as advisor, without salary, to ensure they remember their roots. When Benton finished drafting, he looked at me and said, You really think they'll all accept this? I don't know, I said. But I know they'll understand it. He nodded. You're a rare man, Tom. Most people your age want revenge. You want redemption. I smiled faintly. They're not so different, Benton. One just leaves the door open. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Thank you. The court hearing came 2 weeks later. Margaret arrived with her lawyer, all confidence and polish. Mark looked miserable beside her, while Ethan and Lily sat quietly in the back, watching everything. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, steadying myself on the worn oak cane I'd carved myself years ago. Your Honor, I began, my daughter-in-law believes she's owed a share of my life's. At work, she may be right. After all, what is inheritance but shared history? Margaret's lawyer started to smile, until I continued. But the thing about history is, it's not written by who deserves it most. It's written by who remembers it best. And I remember every nail, every late night, every year my wife waited for me to come home from the workshop. I remember the day my son built his first chair beside me, and the day he forgot what that chair meant. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Carter, what are you proposing? I'm proposing that the wealth of a family be measured not by bank accounts, but by the hearts that hold it. I turned toward my grandchildren. I've already filed new papers. My estate no longer belongs to the past. It belongs to the future, to those who still remember what work, love, and respect mean. Margaret's lawyer started objecting, but it didn't matter. The judge had already read the documents. The case was dismissed. Outside the courthouse, Margaret stormed off without a word. Mark stood there, looking like a man stripped of his armor. "I didn't know she filed that claim," he said quietly. "I know," I said, "but you married her son. That means you let her speak for you." He nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I'll fix it." "I believe you will," I said, "this time for the right reasons." Then Ethan walked up, grinning. "So, I'm in charge of the workshop now?" I laughed. "Not in charge, responsible. There's a difference." He nodded solemnly. "I'll make you proud." Lily hugged me so tight I almost lost my breath. "You already made us proud, Grandpa," she whispered, and for the first time in years, I believed it. That night, back on the porch, I watched the lights from the workshop flicker through the trees. Ethan was still there, sanding something, probably ruining one of my old boards. Lily sat beside me, sketching quietly, her hair catching the last gold of sunset. Mary would have loved this moment. I looked at the stars and whispered, "They remember now, love. You can rest easy." But even as peace settled over me, I knew my time was running short. My hands were trembling more each morning, my breath thinner. It didn't frighten me, not anymore. Because when I go, I'll leave behind more than money or property. I'll leave behind something that can't be taxed, stolen, or sold, the truth of who we were. And I'll make sure they never forget it. You start to feel it before you admit it, the slowing heartbeat, the way mornings come softer, quieter. My doctor called it age, but I knew better. It wasn't age that was catching up to me. It was peace, the kind that doesn't demand to stay forever. The weeks after the court hearing felt strange, like the air around me had changed weight. The house was never empty anymore. Ethan came by every morning before work, tracking sawdust into the kitchen, leaving his coffee mug wherever it landed. Lily painted at the porch table almost every day, filling the air with that mix of turpentine and laughter that reminded me of youth. And Mark came slower. Guilt has its own clock. He'd show up in the evenings, hands in his pockets, always pretending he was just checking in. But one night, after the others left, he stayed. "Dad," he said quietly, "I want to rebuild something with you." I looked up from my chair. "The company?" He shook his head. "No, us." He sat beside me, not speaking for a long time. The fire crackled between us, and I saw that boy again, the one who used to hand me nails while I worked, asking if someday he could build something too. "I let her poison me," he said finally. "Not just with greed, with shame. I thought success meant never looking back." "It's a hard lie to unlearn," I said. He nodded. "Do you think it's too late?" "No," I said. "It's never too late to turn toward home." He exhaled, and for the first time in years, his shoulders dropped. The fight was gone. Only the man remained. After that, we worked side by side again. Nothing big, fixing the fence, sanding old beams, mending the shed roof. But there was healing in those hours, in the rhythm of tools and silence. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, I caught Ethan watching us from the workshop doorway. His eyes shone with something I hadn't seen in him before. Pride, maybe, or reverence. The kind you only feel when you finally understand the cost of the things you take for granted. He walked up to me and handed me a small box made of cedar. "What's this?" I asked. "Something I made," he said shyly. Inside was a carving of our family name, Carter, with an oak tree above it. Its roots ran deep, its branches wide. Beneath it, he'd carved 3 simple words. "We remember you." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "It's not perfect," he said quickly. "The cuts are rough." "It's perfect," I said, "because you made it." Lily hugged him from behind, laughing. "He worked on it for weeks. I wasn't supposed to tell." I wiped my eyes, pretending it was dust. "You both just bought yourselves a place in my will," I said. Lily grinned. "We already had that, Grandpa." Winter came early that year. The air grew brittle, the mornings sharp. My strength faded with the light, but my spirit didn't. I'd done what I needed to do. The papers were filed, the truth was told, and the family I thought I'd lost had found their way home. On Christmas Eve, they all came to the cottage. No catered dinners this time, no expensive gifts. Just firewood, homemade food, and laughter that filled every corner of the house. Ethan set up lights along the porch, and Lily placed a small wooden angel, one she'd carved herself, on the mantel beside Mary's photo. Mark brought wine, but he didn't drink it until he'd made a toast. "To Dad," he said, raising his glass, "who built more than homes. He built us." They all looked at me. I tried to speak, but my throat closed up. So I just nodded, smiled, and whispered, "That's enough." Later that night, after they'd gone to sleep in the spare rooms, I sat by the fire alone. The old house creaked, as it always did, but it sounded gentler somehow, like it was breathing with me. I thought of Mary. I could almost see her sitting across from me, her knitting in her lap, her eyes warm and patient. "You did it," I murmured. "They remember now." The fire crackled once, like she was answering. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the warmth wash over me. The kind of warmth you only feel when everything that's been broken finally fits again. The next morning, the house was quiet. Frost covered the windows, and the world outside shimmered under a pale sun. Mark found me still in my chair, eyes closed, hands folded gently on my lap. They buried me beside Mary, under the oak tree I'd planted when Ethan was born. A month later, the family gathered at the workshop. Ethan stood beside Lily, holding a small envelope Benton had delivered. Mark looked older now, softer, steadier. Ethan unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "My dearest ones, if you're reading this, I've gone home to your grandmother. Don't mourn too long. I had a full life. Not because of what I built, but because of who I loved. I didn't leave you money, I left you a map. Not on paper, but in your hearts. It leads to something the world forgets too easily. Decency, work, and kindness. Follow it, and you'll never be poor. Keep the workshop alive. Let your hands remember what your hearts now know. Build things that last, and when you hear the sound of a hammer on wood, know I'm listening. Love, always, Grandpa Tom." When Ethan finished, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees outside, the same trees that had watched generations of Carters rise, fall, and rise again. Lily walked over to the workbench, placed her hand on the wood, and whispered, "We'll make you proud, Grandpa." Mark nodded. "He already is." And that day, they began again. Not for the business, not for profit, but for memory. They rebuilt the porch, repaired the tools, reopened Tom's workshop, not as a corporation, but as a community space, teaching kids how to build with their hands, just like he had taught them. They hung the cedar carving above the entrance. "Carter, we remember you." And every evening, when the light hit the workshop just right, they swore they could still hear him humming, the rhythm of hammer, wood, and heart, reminding them that legacies aren't written in bank statements or deeds. They're written in people. And Tom Carter's legacy would never fade. If you like the story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and write in the comments if something like, "This has ever happened in your life." I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for watching.